Side chat, August 15th. This is an important date for me. Today would have been my parents' 55th wedding anniversary, and it's also my brother-in-law and his wife's wedding anniversary. So I always love August 15th. Thanks for bearing with us as we took the month of July off from these chats. We're excited to be back with you and beginning another season. So as always, we want to give you an update from our recent State Library Commission meeting, which took place this last Wednesday. And then Corey Sloan is with us, our consultant Corey, to talk about Good Neighbor Day, something that we're pretty excited about here at the State Library. So jumping right into some State Library updates, as always, you can find our agenda, meeting materials, and now the meeting recording from our August 13th meeting. I want to review some of their action items with you and talk about some of the things that are on their mind that we discussed as well. Starting with a couple of different administrative rules processes that the commission is going to be initiating following action at their meeting this past week. The first administrative rule change the State Library is considering is a change to the open hours standard. And I'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute. But just a reminder for all of you, or for those of you who are not familiar with the administrative rules process, the administrative rules tend to be more detailed legal requirements that agencies follow in order to enact laws that pertain to the work of a state agency. And in this case, the State Library Commission is charged by Montana Code to carry out public library standards and to administer a certification program for Montana libraries. And it's through administrative rules that we provide more detailed guidance about what those standards are and what the certification process is. And so it's a significant effort. It's a significant legal requirement that we go through when we consider changes to administrative rules under what's called the Montana Administrative Procedures Act. That act requires significant public notice and public processes in order to really encourage public feedback and public comment about the changes that are being considered to those administrative rules. So the first one with the open hours standard started this past Wednesday when the commission directed us to begin the administrative rules process to consider changes to the open hours standard. And with this process, we will now work with the Secretary of State's office to carry out changes to the administrative rules. The Secretary of State's office is the agency that's tasked with administering Montana's administrative rules. So my encouragement to all of you is to look for more information from the State Library about the proposed changes in the months from mid-September through November. There will be opportunities for all of you to share your thoughts and comments about the changes that the State Library Commission is considering, both in written form. At a date yet to be determined, we will be having a public hearing. So if you want to offer comments in person via Zoom with the commission, there'll be information coming from us about a date in November when that public hearing will happen. And then the commission will consider and provide responses to any public comments that we receive also in November, ahead of taking any action on the proposed administrative rule in December. And then ultimately those changes get published by the Secretary of State's office, and we would anticipate any changes to the administrative rule taking effect for next fiscal year and your standards reporting process for beginning next fiscal year. So let's look at what the changes are that the commission is considering. There's two changes that they are proposing. The first is to the actual reporting period for the open hours that a public library has to meet. Instead of requiring that libraries meet those number of hours on a weekly basis, the commission is looking at changing that to an average number of weekly hours as reported in your annual public library statistics, your public library survey. The intent behind that change is just to recognize that it's very likely that over holiday weeks and other periods, perhaps during a school break and other times throughout the year, a library might not be open that minimum number of hours, and giving libraries more flexibility to report that on average, they are meeting that weekly minimum number of hours requirement. And then hopefully to make it easier on reporting to say that, that the number of hours they're reporting is consistent with what they share in the public library survey. The other change is to reduce the minimum number of open hours by approximately 30%. And the reason the commission is considering this change is to give libraries more flexibility to be open a reduced number of hours. There's some discussion that this might give libraries more flexibility in their budget and be in response to reduced visitation of those at our libraries. So again, this is what is being proposed in the changes to the administrative rule. With the commission's action this last Wednesday, we begin working with the Secretary of State's office. You'll see this administrative rule action published in mid-September. And again, you'll see requests for public comment coming from the state library throughout the fall. So we welcome your comments and hope you'll share any thoughts and ideas that you have with us and with the State Library Commission through that process. Any questions on this proposal? I'm going to turn things over to Tracy to talk about changes to our certification program that the commission is also discussing.
Thank you, Jenny. So Coley and I worked with a subcommittee who was looking at the certification program. And as a reminder, the particular public library standard is only library directors are required to earn a certificate from the state library. And it's a program that has been around for many years. So the State Library Commission opted to look at that certification program and the requirements. And we presented the proposals to the commission, both for the suggested ARM changes and I should say administrative rules of Montana changes, as well as kind of a bit more of the details and the policy handbook. Their action at this last meeting was to initiate the administrative rules process, which is further defining their purpose for the certification program, and then some changes to how they administer continuing education credits. And then if that change is adopted, then they'll go back and look at the policy to see what that needs to look like in reality. So this process, the very first part of it's very similar to what you saw for the open hours standard, because it will be following on a parallel with that open hours standard. So you're looking at public comments, the process working with the Secretary of State happening August to October, and then October and November, the commission reviewing those comments, having a public hearing, and then identifying their response. And then if they wish, taking action on December 10th to adopt the new rules. And then we would follow the Secretary of State's process for publication. The difference between this and the open hours standards is that policy and that handbook piece. And that's what you see happening starting in February. And then implementation will begin in July 1st of 2026. And so that's the plan at this point. So I'll go ahead and move forward so you can see This is the language being proposed. And as I mentioned, it's identifying a purpose, and that purpose is focusing on the foundational skills necessary to manage a public library. It creates a course of studies and topics that the State Library Commission will review annually. It identifies that continuing education credits issued to the State Library Certification Program are the only eligible credits, and then it puts it in a regular review schedule. And so this is the language that's being proposed. And much like the open hours standard, you have plenty of opportunities to comment. There will be an opportunity for written comment. You're always welcome to call State Library staff, myself, or Colette, of course, and then you can attend that public hearing if you would like to comment on that as well. So I want to pause here and just see Colette or Jennie, is there anything you would like to add?
I think you covered it well, Tracy.
Okay. So I know that for most of you, it's probably the details that you're really interested in. And so I wanted to share this comparison because I do think that that helps in understanding, like at this point, what this might look like. This is more about the policy. And so this is the part that may change. And in fact, it is the part that a couple of the commissioners in particular are really interested in your feedback on, particularly the number of credits and how this might work and the topics and their relevance for library directors. So what you see is the current program, which has those 3 certificates, administrator, staff, and trustee. It's based on 4 subject areas. That's that library administration, library services to the public, collection management, and technical services and technology. You know, the credits are awarded retroactively, but maybe most importantly, credits are verified by a supervisor, either the director or the board chair. And then the process is basically 60 credits in 4 years. So the proposed changes go down to just the one certificate for library directors, and it's not really based on categories. Instead, it's based on a series of foundational skills, from oversee and manage library services, to understand budgets and finances, to understand the law. And then the credits will need to be provided by MSL staff or pre-approved if they're not already pre-approved by the commission, and there'll be a process for that. And then there's a foundational initial certificate with the 20 credits in 1 year, and that is in particular of interest to the commission to know if that's doable, particularly for small town directors. And then renewals will be 60 credits in 5 years. So these are just sort of a sense of some of the proposed changes. Again, this is all just proposed. We'll go through the administrative rules process, plenty of opportunity to comment, and then look at the policy, and again, more opportunities to comment. So with that, I guess, unless Jennie and Colette, there's anything you would like to add, I will turn it back over to you, Jennie.
Thanks, Tracy. Just a reminder, you're going to see a lot of communication from the State Library about both of these administrative rule changes this fall, and then a lot more opportunity for public feedback about the policy behind the certification program through the winter and into next spring. So this is a process that we take very seriously, and it's really important that if you have opinions about these changes, that you take the time to share them with us. It's really important that we hear from all of you. So look for more information coming from us. There is a question in the chat about how this will change staff certification. Tracy, I'll let you take that one.
Yep, I saw that. And so basically staff would choose to just get the director certificate. One thing I will say is that the renewal, the commission isn't requiring a certain number of hours in each skill set. For the initial, they are, but for the renewal, it's whatever is relevant to your position or your library. And so I could see for staff, the initial will have more administration than they might need depending on their position, but for the renewal, they could probably lean more into the library services piece.
Thanks, Tracy. Any other questions about these changes or the open hours standard changes?
Yeah, this is Sarah. I have one more
You
related
bet.
to that. So the staff would receive that initial director certification or the one track, right? And then when they go to do their renewal, will those courses also have to go through the commission vetting process for approved coursework?
Yep, so
Okay.
basically the way to think of it is there'll be a course catalog tied to those skill sets, and the courses in that course catalog count for credit. And if anything's to be added to it, there will be a process for the commission to review it, but you want to get pre-approval.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And
So
go ahead.
in the meantime, can we just proceed as normal as we have been?
Yes, and I would say if you're close to earning certification, I would strongly encourage you to go ahead and go forward with that.
Mhm.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Good
And
question, Sarah.
Julie, so trustees would be the same. They would have to do that director's certificate. We wouldn't, at this point, there's no plan to have that, just the fewer credit trustee track that we have currently. And at this point, Nancy, I think we're still working on the transition with the current CE credits carrying over. And that is the transition piece is the piece that Coley and I are still working on, and one of the reasons why we do strongly suggest finishing your certification and earning the new certificate. So because you would be finishing the current program. And I think Jenny, the Jackie's, why is the commission lowering library standards? Do you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, I will. With regard to the open hours standard, the commission has been looking at some of the visitation data and found that over the course of the last decade or so, visitation in libraries has declined. It is starting to rebound now, but it has declined over the last period. And the commission has had discussion about the fact that if the library were open fewer hours, they might then be able to redirect funding to things like digital content that patrons might take advantage of even outside of open hours. So their discussion is really about just giving more flexibility to local libraries. Obviously understanding that it would be up to a library to choose to reduce their open hours or not. And I see Terry's question. Looks like Coley has responded. Terry, if there's any follow-up question, just feel free to let us know. Other questions?
That's good feedback, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay. Moving on, the other significant action that we think libraries might be interested in that the commission took at their meeting was to retire the Excellent Library Services Award. For those of you who have applied for this, you know it's been a process of applying for an award that demonstrates that libraries are striving to meet those excellent library standards under our old public library standards process. And state library staff for a while have wanted to consider how we could improve upon that kind of recognition. There's a long history to how the state library has recognized libraries over the years, and the current iteration has been our Excellent Library Services Award. The commission had a subcommittee that looked at the award, looked at data, including our public library survey, to consider what other measures by which we might consider recognizing libraries. And they came away with the understanding that how we have been proceeding with the Excellent Library Services Award was sort of more of a participation award rather than something that in and of itself might encourage a library to strive for excellence. And based on their deliberation, then that subcommittee recommended to the full commission that we retire the Excellent Library Services Award as it exists now. So the commission did take that action on Wednesday as well. So we will not be offering an Excellent Library Services Award in the coming year. The other bit of discussion that the commission had that I wanted to make you aware of pertains to the state library's relationship with the American Library Association and the Montana Library Association. As you know, the state library disassociated with the American Library Association a few years ago now. And it's obviously very important for us as we face federal scrutiny in our funding that we be very cognizant of any kinds of activities that might be perceived as outside of the current bounds of appropriateness according to our federal funding requirements. And that includes executive orders pertaining to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The commission is very cognizant of those concerns and doesn't want us to engage in any kind of activities that might jeopardize our funding. And so they're again looking at our relationship with ALA, concerned about ALA's actions in regard to DEI as well as advocacy work, and also recognizing that MLA as a chapter of ALA is something that warrants additional thought. So I wanted to make you aware that the commission is deliberating about that relationship out of an abundance of caution over the funding that we receive, and in an attempt to ensure that we don't do anything that might jeopardize that federal funding. Any other questions about the State Library Commission, their meeting or agenda? I did want to let you all know that their next meeting is going to be October 8th in Belgrade. We're excited to have their meeting at the new Belgrade Community Library. That is the meeting where our Federation coordinators come and present their annual reports on the work of the federations as well. So if you're in the Belgrade area, we would love to see you at that meeting. All right. I'm very happy to have Corey with us to talk a little bit more about Good Neighbor Day.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you online today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Good Neighbor Day, which falls every year on September 28th. Good Neighbor Day, it sounds like one of those fun holidays like National Pancake Day or National Library Day, but it is a true holiday declared by Jimmy Carter in 1978. But it was started by a woman in Montana, in Lakeside, Montana, in the 70s. Um, and the idea is that it combats isolation, which we know that isolation and loneliness is an epidemic in the United States. It was declared an epidemic in 2023. Um, and so we know in libraries that we're stewards of community, we're community gathering places. We already are a place to go for connection. And a local nonprofit that promotes Good Neighbor Day, and I'm sorry, not local, national nonprofit that promotes Good Neighbor Day, recognized libraries as neighborly stewards as well. And they've created guides for libraries to participate in Good Neighbor Day. And we at the State Library really, really believe in the mission of Good Neighbor Day and want to help promote it as well. So this is the first step of hopefully a growing project that the State Library brings support to Good Neighbor Day through local libraries. I'm going to drop in the chat the National Good Neighbor Day link. They have a guide that you can download. We also have the guide that we can send you directly, but I think downloading it is cool because that will up their statistics and show on their end that people are interested, libraries are interested in promoting Good Neighbor Day, promoting friendliness and neighborliness. And you might think like, why do I need a guide? What can't I do this on my own? Yeah, of course. And you don't need to only do it in September either. The guide is really nice. It has coloring sheets for kids. It has ideas of programs that you could tie to this. I'm a former library programmer, and we held a block party on the west side of town, far from the library in Bozeman, for Good Neighbor Day a couple of years ago with some neighborly partners. So I personally have a vested interest in Good Neighbor Day and would love to share it with you. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, and you want to get some potential additional support around it, this is the first year that we're promoting it at the state. It's eventually going to be a trunk on the lifelong learning website or page on the state library website. But for now, we have a pledge form. If you say, hey, yes, I want to do this. I want to tell you I'm committed. You can email me, of course, but if you want, there's a pledge form that you can fill out just showing your commitment. Good Neighbor Day is a Sunday this year. I'm not expecting people to program their hearts out on a Sunday, but if you want to, that's up to you. Oh, I love that comment in the chat, Kim, about Good Neighbor Day. Yeah, it's something that was started in Montana, so I think it's really cool to bring it back to Montana and really promote it. And libraries are such a natural partner that this organization that's promoting Good Neighbor Day has a whole guide specifically for libraries. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
That's all I have to say.
Corey, thank you. Any questions for Corey? All right. All right, just a reminder, everyone, Federation grant reports due today. Don't leave your Federation coordinators hanging. Any other questions? Tracy, Coley, anyone else? Any other updates or reminders?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, and I hope folks will continue to put those questions in the chat. But we do want to remind you of some upcoming events. August 19th, continuing the legal topics series. There will be a new MSL resource review on the 28th. Another edition, we're kind of closing in on the end of the Navigating the Roadmap series of webinars. And then just check that Aspen calendar, look for the newsletters to arrive in your inbox. There will be sharing additional information about how to provide feedback as we go through the processes that were initiated this week with administrative rules and that. But do stay in touch. And we love to hear from you, whether it's an email or a phone call or what have you. But please don't hesitate to reach out, and please don't hesitate to jump into the webinars. I will remind you also, as we're wrapping up our time today, really, really appreciate everyone having their name in the participant list, and it makes it that much easier for me to apply the credits and mark you attended for today's webinar as well. So thank you for that. That's all I have, Jenny.
Great. Thanks, Colette. Thank you all for your participation. You know how to get a hold of us if you have any questions. As always, we really appreciate your evaluations of all of our events, including continuing education. One of the things that's on my mind right now as we think about reimagining our certification program is how we evaluate the impact of the changes that we're considering. And so your feedback to us about the continuing education opportunities we offer will help us to make sure that we're continuing to strive to offer excellent continuing education resources for all of you. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And look for our next website chat in October. We're going to skip September because of the fall workshop and very, very busy weeks in the month of September. So we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.